Yeah, we also want to bring in some of the latest coverage all weekend that we've been covering. One of the areas that we covered was Steinhatchee in Florida there.
Yeah, and Fox Weather Storm Specialist Mike Seidel is in Steinhatchee right now, and he's got the latest developments on Debby. Mike, obviously you've been in a lot of hurricanes. Man, some of those parts of the eye wall look like have been affecting the area. What's the latest down in Steinhatchee right now?
Yeah, we're in the eye wall right now. The winds have gusted over 60 miles an hour, but it's a wind from the northeast and east. So far, the river, the Steinhatchee, is in good shape because the wind is literally blowing the water out into the Gulf of Mexico. Now, that's going to change once the center of the eye, it looks like it's going to go right over us in the next hour or so, and the winds here are going to go down dramatically to 5 or 10 miles an hour. Once it goes by, we'll get the backside flow, and that'll be more of an onshore flow and push the Gulf water up through the Steinhatchee. The National Hurricane Center is still forecasting a 6 to 10 foot surge, at least as of the last advisory. That was 11 o'clock last night. I have not had a chance to see the updated 5 a.m. advisory, but there will be a surge coming up the Steinhatchee. A ton of rainfall so far. I walked around the area this morning, and there's a lot of street flooding in the area. As you can imagine, rainfall rates of 1 to 2 inches an hour. By the way, down on the coast, to the west coast of Florida, Sarasota has come awfully close. I'm going to verify this with the Weather Service, to their wettest day on record since 1911. They're up close to 11 inches yesterday, and now over a foot storm total. So we have the wind, the rain, the surge, and that's really the story. The other story is the power. Here in Dixie County, 31% of the county is out. That's about 10,000 customers. It's not a heavily populated area, but the power is out across the county, about a third of the residents. We're on here. We're also on across the river. That's on the other side, the other part of Steinhatchee. So right now, you can't complain. The river is staying in its banks for now, and the power is still on. But we've got a long way to go. We're going to be in the eye wall for another hour or so, and then we get into the eye, and then we'll see what happens on the backside as that wind pushes the water from the Gulf right up here into the Steinhatchee River. Craig, Ari?
All right, Mike, thanks so much. Yeah, we appreciated that, especially when you think about that river and the amount of rain that's been coming down. We'll check in with you again. I can hear the rain coming down at this hour. Real quick, when you've been out here, you've covered these storms as well. What is your biggest concern going throughout the rest of the day? I mean, so much rain has fallen. Flooding is an issue for sure.
Yeah, we're under a flash flood warning. I believe it's just about 10:45 this morning. That could be extended. So away from the river, it's all about the fresh water, the rainfall, 1 to 2 inches an hour, adding up, saturated ground, and there's a lot of 6 to 10 inches of water in the road right out here where we're staying here on the river in Steinhatchee. So that's only going to multiply and get worse. And again, the flash flood warning. The best bet today is stay home and stay put unless you're in a flood-prone area, then head to higher ground. But if you're fine, you don't deal with flooding, even when you get a lot of rainfall, then just stay home and just ride it out. Because these winds so far gusting 60 plus miles an hour here. I know Horseshoe Beach gusted higher down the coast. That kind of wind isn't going to cause a tremendous amount of damage. Usually we get to 60 and plus, then you start to see maybe some power lines or trees down. But so far so good. As I mentioned on the bright note, 2/3 of the county still has their lights on this morning.
Hey, Mike, you said that the river's behaving so far. Obviously, when we've got a landfalling hurricane, storm surge is one of the highest concerns. And you see in the forecast, 6 to 10 feet of storm surge. You're saying that hasn't happened yet? Are we expecting it to get worse throughout the day?
It should get worse once the storm goes by us because the winds will shift direction and blow onshore and blow the water in from the Gulf of Mexico. So right now, we're not getting that kind of wind. They are getting that kind of wind direction in Cedar Key, and Brian mentioned that the tidal gauge is running about 4 feet above normally high ground. But right now, the river is basically where it should be. And the other thing working in our favor as we go through the morning is the tide is going out. So that's a promising note. Low tide here in Steinhatchee officially 9:07. So we got 4 more hours of water going out with the wind blowing the water out, but then the wind will start to blow the water in and then fight the tide going out. So we'll see how the calculus works out in that equation, but right now we're looking good, but still we've got a ways to go as that wind shifts direction once the eye goes through, And it will be interesting, guys, to see what happens to the winds here in the next hour or so, how calm they get. Do they go down to calm, 5 miles an hour, 6 miles an hour, once we get into the center of Hurricane Debby?
We appreciate it. Fox Weather Storm Specialist Mike Seidel, thank you. We're going to check in with you all morning now, though, as we head out to Steinhatchee, Florida, one of the areas being hit out there.
Yeah, Fox Weather Storm Specialist Mike Seidel has been out in Steinhatchee pretty much all morning. And Mike, you had the eye wall move through. Have things calmed down at all? Looks like it's still pretty intense down there.
No, it's calmed down quite a bit. Our winds now gusting about 25 or 30 miles an hour versus 60 to 70. The rain has virtually stopped. Now, this is what we call a dirty eye. When we get into it full force, the winds are going to go almost calm, but the sky's not going to clear. I don't think we're going to see any stars. And I was in the eye of Hurricane Floyd back in September of 1999 on the Causeway, Wrightsville Beach and Wilmington, and it was surreal. The temperature actually went up, and the birds started flying around because they try to find the calm air and they stay kind of in the eye. So that was interesting. We're not going to have that kind of eye. That was a high-end Cat 2 as it came through that area. That was, wow, 25 years ago. Where did the time go? Back here, though, we've got one update. The power has gone out at our location here in Steinhatchee. Looking across the river, yep, it's dark everywhere. There's a few generators on, but that's about it. Rainfall totals already now 4 to 6 inches in the area. We're under a flash flood warning for this whole area, the Nature Coast up here on the Big Bend, and that goes until 10:45 a.m. But you'll notice on the radar, and Brian mentioned this quite a bit, that the backside is not nearly as intense as the front side. The worst of it right now is down in Cedar Key, and they're getting that onshore flow. Our winds are starting to turn. Whoa, there goes the Fox hat. I better get that before it before it blows all the way down to Cancun. As I was mentioning, Cedar Key getting the worst of it right now because they're still in that eye wall, and they've also got that wind blowing onshore right into that part of the state. Our winds now are still basically northeast coming down the river, and the tide is going out until about 9:07 a.m. So in the short term, we have no surge issues at all. We'll see how that pans out. We're keeping our fingers crossed. This whole area was just shellacked with Idalia last August. They had a storm surge up to 12 feet. Many of the buildings here had to be just rebuilt. So Ari and Craig, look at that. I mean, it's almost calm now. That's what happens when you get into the eye of a hurricane.
Just like that, right? And it's amazing how it just happens, comes and goes. You also talked about last year recovery from Idalia. Mike, you've covered so many stories and so many situations. When you got to this community, what was it like as far as rebuilding, and what was the talk of the town? Because they knew the storm potentially was headed in their direction.
There was a lot of apprehension because the memory was fresh of what happened last August with the on two sides of the river, actually two different counties. We're in Dixie County. I believe that's Taylor County across the river. And so, yes, everybody was really, really concerned and on edge because it hadn't even been a year yet. And the folks that run the motel and the marina here, man, they were just literally just scared and praying that they didn't have to come back and rebuild again. I don't think that's going to happen. First of all, Idalia came in as a low-end Cat 3. This is coming in as a kind of a low-end Cat 1, so that's a big difference there. Yeah. The push of water is not going to be as strong. We've got the tide going out. Right now, the winds are almost calm, or 10 miles an hour. Now, when they come around to the backside, we don't expect the winds to gust 70, 80 miles an hour, but they will pick up again, and we'll see how much water gets pushed up the river. But again, that's going to be occurring at least in the next 3 hours during tide going out, a slack tide, and then the tide will come in, and that'll be the crunch time. After 9 o'clock, when the tide starts coming in and we have the wind blowing the water from the Gulf up the Steinhatchee, that'll be where we'll be watching the coast here and see how much water rise we get. Steen down in Cedar Key, 4.5 feet. If they only get 4 feet here, they will be very, very happy here in Steinhatchee.
Hey, Mike, can you explain a little bit about the geography down in that specific region? Because I know when a lot of people think about storm surge, you know, we've got a lot of people that are watching this probably from landlocked areas that haven't lived along the coast. You think about storm surge, it's like only when you live along the coast, it's just the beach coming up or the water coming up onto the beach. But in this particular case, and sometimes you can actually have rivers that start along the coastline that move inland, and the surge can actually get pushed up those too.
Yes, and that's what happened last year. When you've got a river here in the Big Bend or any coastal area and you have an onshore wind, that's going to push the water upriver, or say upstream. So the water is going to go from the Gulf, which is only about a mile or so behind me, just around the bend, and it's going to push it up this way. So in that case, you have to be concerned. Anytime you have wind blowing onshore, like in Tampa Bay, when you get a southwest wind, south-southwest wind, that's going to blow the water up into Tampa Bay. That's exactly what we had with Idalia, what we've had with Debby, but certainly a much less of a threat and a surge number down there. Speaking of surge, and a spot where you don't have to worry about surge is inland areas, but the big story with Debby is going to be the prolific rainfall totals. Robert Ray, my partner up in Perry, not far away, about 40 minutes. Robert, I just checked the obs out of Perry, out of the airport, and they've already had 4 1/3 inches of rain. Your peak gust officially running at 46 miles an hour.
And Mike, I'll tell you.
Okay, we don't have Robert this time. Go ahead.
Yeah.
We'll go back to the studio.
We lost him, technical issues, but we'll get him as soon as we can, Mike, and we'll check in with you as well with all of the great updates and information you bring to us as we continue to track Debby. You talked about the amount of rain and the amount of water that's coming down. That's going to be a big part of the story. Kane.
Yeah, so guess who we actually have that is directly in the center of the eye right now? He was dealing with some pretty nasty wind in the eye wall earlier, but Fox Weather's Mike Seidel is live in Steinhatchee, where I imagine things are pretty calm right now as compared to where we were at a little bit earlier. Mike, how are things looking right now?
Yes, indeed. In fact, right now, hardly a whiff of wind where I'm standing. So it's pretty dramatic, and I've seen this before. You get the eye, and the wind almost goes calm. Now, it's what we call dirty eye. We don't have any blue sky. We're not going to see the sunshine, but the rain has just completely stopped. We've had about 4.5 inches of rain here. Peak wind gust at the WeatherSim station, 87, but our good friend here, who is considered the expert at the marina, was spending the night on his beautiful sailboat, had a wind gust of 86 miles an hour. Now, they tied all the boats down earlier yesterday, and you can see over there they're bobbing a little bit, but no damage to the boats. The only concern now, in addition to what additional rain we get, and we've probably had most of our rain, at least more than half of it, because the backside is not as wet or windy. The water continues to come up, although the tide is going out. In fact, the wind is still blowing downriver. We're not getting an onshore flow yet. Once the storm does get farther north and east of us, the winds will come around to the south and southwest, and that'll start to push more water up. So we're hoping for the best. They're bracing for the worst, because just less than a year ago here, they had Idalia, and the peak surge was up around 12 feet. So there's another gust. Once again, not one of those eyes, a classic eye where you have a major hurricane and the wind just goes calm and the birds fly around and the temperature goes up. Ari and Craig?
Yeah, impressive when you talk about that. Behind you, I believe we saw some of the birds flying around.
Robert Ray and Perry. Robert, I passed it along to you. Probably saw the text. Peak wind gust 62 miles an hour, and you've had almost 5 inches of rain, and it's still coming down up there for you.
Yeah, there he is.
In force here in Perry.
Thank you so much,
Right,
Brian.
exactly.
We want to bring in Fox Weather storm specialist Mike Seidel. Mike, you have moved locations. You were actually in the eye of Debby when it went through Steinhatchee, and now you've moved inland a little bit. What's the situation there?
Okay, we have moved inland. We're following the eye wall. We've come up 51, about an hour drive from the Steinhatchee area. We're in Live Oak, Florida, so we're just off I-10 and I-75 area. We're closer to I-10. And this building, we noticed, has taken it certainly on the chin with the wind blowing the aluminum off the roof. We often see a lot of this corrugated aluminum ripped off from gas station overhangs during severe weather and tornadoes, but we notice this flopping around. We're still getting wind gusts out here 40 to 50 miles an hour, and the rain has been torrential. The other issue has been the wind and the wet ground and the trees. And I think we've got some video we're going to roll right here. We shot on the way here. And there are a lot of trees down on Highway 51. There's been no effort, of course, at this point in the middle of the hurricane to clean it up. But we had to go around a lot of trees. Look at these trees here. Most of these are not hardwoods. They're pine trees blowing down on the highway and taking out power lines. Now, the power here in this part of Live Oak is on, but back to the south, most of Dixie County is without power, and that goes without saying when you have all the wind and the trees. Fortunately, this is a very rural area for the most part, outside of these small towns, so there's not a lot of folks out here, but still, if you lose your power, you lose your power. Some of the counties, 70%, 2/3 to 70% of the power is off, where you're talking about, 8 or 10,000 customers. So the wind and the rain continues. The storm is slowing down, and that's the crux of the issue, not only today and tonight, but going in to the middle and latter part of the week, as Brian Norcross just mentioned, Britta. It's going to slow down and rain itself out, and we've seen systems I've covered, depressions that just sit there, and there's nothing to move them. It's like squeezing a sponge, and it just keeps raining and raining. And you can get 30, 35 inches of rain. I'm not saying that's going to happen this time, but I would be not surprised at all if somebody in Georgia or South Carolina gets over 20 inches of rain in the next several days. I mentioned earlier, wanted to bring it up again, Sarasota, Florida had their wettest day on record yesterday with 11.06. Just over 11 inches of rain yesterday, their wettest day going back to 1911. So that puts it in perspective how wet this system is so far, and it's going to be even worse and more prolific in the next 3 to 4 days.
It certainly does, Mike. I mean, looking back at the rain from Adalia, Sarasota's rain total was 6.5 inches. So that shows the difference between a system that moves through and one that is slower moving and continuing in that direction.
Right, you cut the speed in half and you double the rainfall or quadruple the rainfall. Right now, I can't remember the formula, but yes, you slow that system down and the rainfall amounts just go way up. Typically, every system is different, but this one's going to throw in its brakes and just waddle around and basically just fester there on the coast or just off the coast. And it's going to be a lot of rainfall, and that means river flooding and flooding in areas that are low-lying. On the way here, there was water everywhere in the fields. Not so much on the road. It drained off the roads nicely, but there are puddles and things everywhere, and a lot of standing water in the fields here in the northern part of Florida. Again, we're in Live Oak, and we're just off I-10, so we're between Tallahassee and Jacksonville, and we're going to stay with the eye wall as it continues to move northeast through the afternoon and this evening.
Wow, you can just hear that metal on the roof. Right. Be safe, expected.
Our team, they're positioned throughout Debbie's path where impacts are going to be the strongest, and we've already seen that along Florida's Big Bend. Our coverage includes reporters, meteorologists, and exclusive storm trackers. When we look at where people are, we have Nicole Valdez in Greenville, Robert Ray in Perry. Mike Seidel started in Steinhatchee, but actually, let's bring him in. Fox Weather's newest storm specialist. He's now in Live Oak, Florida, looking and experiencing some of the stronger winds that Debbie has. Good morning, Mike.
And good morning, Steve and Britta. Good to be back here on Fox Weather this morning. Yes, in Steinhatchee, it was wild for about an hour and a half. And then we took the eye wall. After the eye wall, we got into the eye. The winds died off and the rain ended. Like 5 or 6 inches of rain there. Peak gusts there 87 miles an hour. Now we've come inland, and I checked the latest observation at the Swanee County Airport, and they're gusting over 50 miles an hour. And we've already had here 4 to 5 inches of rain. Rainfall totals are going to add up. They're really going to add up in the Carolinas, but this is a driving rain on Highway 51, and I want to show you what we dealt with. First, let's go to the video I shot through the windshield, and look at that rain coming down. I mean, it was basically your basic frog strangler, white knuckle driving. We had to take it nice and easy, and we also had to dodge this. Trees, a lot of trees down. About every mile or so there's a tree down. Most of these were the pine trees, and again, a lot of power out here in the Big Bend area of Florida. We are in Live Oak, which is just off Interstate 10. It puts us between Tallahassee and the Jacksonville area. We showed you the building earlier. Yeah, we're giving FedEx some free airtime here in Fox Weather. You can see how the roof has been ripped up, corrugated aluminum. We see that often with tornadoes and gas stations, and typically that's like a Cat 1 hurricane. So you don't need much wind, 70, 75 miles an hour, I should say. An EF1 tornado. This was a Cat 1 hurricane, 70, 75 miles an hour, and you can get aluminum to come off. And this is an old building that's not in use, so obviously it's taken some wear and tear over time. A lot of standing water, big puddle here, but up and down this highway, off to the side, the ditches are loaded up with water. I mean, just water everywhere. The ground coming into this was very saturated, and so it didn't take much to cause flooding. And we now have a flash flood warning in this area extended until 12:15 this afternoon. We just got the alert on our smartphones, and no doubt that could be extended farther. But on the radar, you'll notice where we are, and it won't be long before that what's left of the eye, the drier air, comes in here at least briefly. So we're going to continue to follow this as it moves north and northeast and crosses state lines into Georgia. And then, as we've been talking about for several days, it's going to drop incredible amounts of rainfall as we get into Georgia, South Carolina, even parts of North Carolina. The bullseye could be Charleston, could be Savannah, somewhere in between. But no doubt somebody's going to pick up 15, if not 20 plus inches of rainfall. And we've had a long lead time, but what can you do? If you're in a flood-prone area, you get to higher ground. And remember, the number one thing, if there's flash flooding going on, we saw this with Floyd back in '99 and other hurricanes. You get a lot of fatalities after the hurricane makes landfall because people venture out and want to do the looky-loo, or they think they need to go somewhere, and they end up running into flooded roadways, especially at night, and they lose their lives, unfortunately. So just be aware and hunker down in your house in the coming days in those areas. Stock up on what you need as far as supplies, perishable, non-perishable foods in that part of the low country of South Carolina, right up to Myrtle Beach, the Grand Strand, and up into Wilmington and Wrightsville. And just be prepared for flash flooding for a couple of days. You know, you went through that, was it 2017? Was it Florence in 2017? I believe it was 2017. Anyway, you know what I'm talking about. Meanwhile, Britta and Stephen, just unrelenting horizontal pelting rain here. Sustained winds running at about 30, gusts to 50 as we trek on through the state of Florida into Georgia in the coming hours.
Mentioned that flash flood warning that was in effect, that considerable threat. According to the National Weather Service, already between 6 and 12 inches of rain has fallen there. And if we're basing this all on radar, looks as if the worst of Debby, that core, is moving through Live Oak as we speak, as is evidenced by those gusty winds. What we have. Stand by, Mike Seidel.
We do want to bring in Mike Seidel. Mike, behind you, we can clearly see the floodwater. Where are you? Because I know that you're chasing the eye. Wow, it's right up to the headlights.
It is. The driver has gotten out. A gentleman got out safely before we got here. But this is just what we've seen all over the place, coming down 51, standing water everywhere. And when you get a low spot like this is what happens. In fact, the water continues to come up. Brian's been talking about it. We've been looking at the radar, and it's slowed down considerably. We've stayed in what is left of the eye wall here in Live Oak now for half an hour or so, and it's just unrelenting. The wind is not as strong, and we're going to see the winds die down. I mean, from here on out, really, it's going to be more about the rain than the wind. We may still have some more power outages. I'm starting to see some of those show up now in the state of Georgia. Here in Florida now, we're up to about 270,000. They're all in the Big Bend area, several counties now basically completely in the dark. But a low spot in this roadway here through Live Oak. We're just off Interstate 10. And speaking of I-10, if you're trying to drive from here on 10 over towards Lake City, there are several closures on that highway because of low spots, and the rain continues to come down. Once the rain stops, why we call it flash flooding, the water will drain away, but that's not going to happen anytime real soon. So heads up if you're watching your driving today on 75 or 10 in this part of Florida, and then eventually on I-95 through the Carolinas and Georgia. Any low spots could be problematic and troublesome right on through the next several days, maybe into Wednesday. So big issues, the flash flood warning here until early this afternoon. We've had 6 to 12 inches of rain here. Sarasota, Florida set their wettest day on record yesterday. They had 11.06 inches. They've had more since then. I think now they're between 13 and 14 inches of rain. So that sets the stage. And that's when Debby was moving at about 13 to 15 miles an hour. So just imagine what happens when you take something like that and slow it down. The rainfall totals are going to be historic and probably more rain than most people alive have ever seen in the Charleston, Savannah area. So somewhere in that area from Georgia, the coastal Georgia area up into the low country of South Carolina, and even up to the Grand Strand in Myrtle Beach and also Wilmington, Wrightsville, there's going to be a fair amount of rain. We'll also see what happens once it gets along and off the coast, how much onshore flow we're going to have, how much push of water we're going to have. That would be basically from Charleston north. We're talking, well, Folly Beach, Isle of Palms, up towards Georgetown and Myrtle Beach. So Britta and Stephen, it just keeps coming and coming. The only promising thing is the wind is dying down. The friction of land weakens these systems, but now it will rain itself out. And unfortunately, we don't have any jet stream flow, and it's just going to be left behind for a while. And the result is going to be historic flooding in these parts of these three states.
And it's scary. I mean, all three of us have been in this scenario with a stalled tropical system. And it is terrifying because you can't have any drop in floodwater until you turn the faucet off. And for you, Mike, the faucet's not going to turn off for quite some time. That rain's going to continue to fall. So all of a sudden, I think the benchmark is going to be the car behind you. Thankfully, as you mentioned, that gentleman got out of the car and is safe. But I think we'll see the water level continue to go over the headlights and progress from there. We send the best to you and your crew, Mike. You guys stay safe as well.
Okay, thank you. Well, we keep an eye on this, and we'll keep you updated as we track the eye as it moves, really not moving, kind of jogging and limping its way north and east.
No joke about that, Mike. I mean, it's really just slowed down to a crawl, and we await that newest advisory from the Hurricane Center that's probably going to be reflective of its forward motion. Right now, it's at 10 miles an hour, but you've been in this heavy band for quite some time. Thanks again for the update. Fox Weather Storm Specialist Mike includes reporters, meteorologists, and exclusive storm trackers. We have teams also who have been mobilized. Britta, for example, Mike Seidel, our Fox Weather Storm Specialist, making that landfall in Steinhatchee. Debby did. Mike was there, but he's moved since. So let's bring him in now and see the latest. Mike got to, I think, Live Oak before Debby got to Live Oak. But guess what, Mike? You and Debby are there right now, and nothing much has changed. This thing is really slowed down.
No, it's like it's becoming a short-term relationship here. It's slowing down. I just looked at the radar in the past hour. I put my finger on, what was the eye, and it's not moving. And another thing we see a lot of is there's frogs hopping around all over the place because of this. Look at this flash flooding. This is a low spot. There's a retention pond to the left, I was told by the local law enforcement. And the car earlier, the water when we got here was up to about the top of the bumper. The lights were on. Now the lights are gone, and it's continuing to get higher and higher. The gentleman in the car got out safely. We've been here about 45 minutes, so it happened probably about an hour ago. When I was standing here half an hour ago, right here, it was dry. So we've got, where it was dry, we've got about 6 inches of water, flood water, fresh water. And based on the radar, it's going to continue to rise because the rain is not stopping anytime soon. This is not moving like it was just 6 or 7 hours ago. Yesterday, it was moving 15, then 14, 13 miles an hour. Now we're waiting for the 11 a.m. update. I believe it's 11 a.m. and you probably have it. I haven't had a chance to see it on my phone, but no doubt this system, Debby, has slowed down. And rain, prolific totals here, over a foot in some areas. And we're just getting started, and if you look at the radar, you'll see how it's just spitting over the same area. Now, we talk about training in meteorology, where rain just goes like on a train track. Well, in this case, it's not going in a straight line, it's rotating. And the northeast eye wall, what's left of Debby, the eye wall that we had earlier down in Steinhatchee, when it came in around first light around 7 a.m. is up here, but the forward motion has really backed off. So these areas are going to get more rain than we saw down there in Steinhatchee. In those areas, we had, when I left, it had basically ended, and we'd had about 4.5 to 5 inches of rain in that area. So Stephen and Britta, we are just going to stay here and watch it add up. It's just incredible how this thing has slowed down. And we knew it was going to happen down the road, talking about Georgia and the Carolinas, but all of a sudden it seems like the steering flow has fallen apart and it's just thrown on the brakes here. By the way, we just talked to the state police here, and I got an update on I-10. It is open, but there are some trees you'll have to go around on I-10. But there's, as far as we know, just a few minutes ago from dispatch, there's no issues with flooded low spots on Interstate 10. That would be the stretch from here in the Live Oak area over towards Lake City, heading towards Jacksonville.
Yeah, while we have you, Mike, I do want to talk about what's going to be happening in the future, especially because of the flooding that we're seeing behind you. When you start to drop that forward motion, you start to get very concerned about inland flooding. And the forecast that we have in the Carolinas is extremely concerning. And the tough thing is, when it comes to inland flooding, it's not like you can evacuate people. You have to respond to the areas that unfortunately end up in a situation where they need help. So for giving, advice to folks in the Carolinas, from your experience of dealing with storms that stall out, how do you prepare for that when you don't know if it's going to be you, but you know the potential here is for 2 feet of rain and somebody most likely is going to be the person that's pulled out of their house?
Yeah, my advice, if you're not in a flood-prone area, you're not in a flood zone, stay put. Best thing today or tomorrow is go out and get your supplies, because you may not be able to get out for a few days until later in the week. So have what you need and just stay put. The worst thing you can do is go out of the house during the flooding event. We've seen that with post-hurricanes and tropical storms. People venture out when they don't really have to, especially at night. That's the crux. So the real problem is going out at night. You can't see, like this gentleman in broad daylight thought he was going to be fine, and look at the car sitting there in broad daylight. So best bet, if you're in a flood-prone area, get to a higher ground. And we're not talking about a flash flood that lasts for maybe an hour or so. We're talking about what we're seeing here being repeated downstream through coastal sections of Georgia and certainly South Carolina and parts of North Carolina in the next 3 or 4 days. This kind of rain, unrelenting, just adding up and really having nowhere to go. And so the flooding adds up. Then you throw in the river aspects. Remember Florence back in, was it 2017, I believe? That was a real problem. I-95 was closed there around, I believe it was Fayetteville. I'm not quite, I think it was Fayetteville. Anyway, you had literally thousands of folks trying to get back to Florida who had evacuated. And we were in this town, and you had to get off the interstate and go through town. And even through town, the river was going over the little 2-lane road at about, 6 to 12 inches deep. So there could be a lot of impacts on the highways, even major interstates, because you're throwing rivers into the mix as this water has to run off somewhere. And then once again, reminding you, if you're not in a flood-prone area, just sit tight and ride it out. If you are in a flood-prone area, find safety, higher ground with friends or family, and just be aware. I mean, again, we're talking about areas that are prone to flooding, not a summertime thunderstorm, but if you went through, say, Florence, or any very heavy rainfall event, like it happened around Columbia with Florence, if you were flooded at that particular time, you could be dealing with this kind of flooding again. Just, you got to remember what you went through in recent years and how bad it was. And if it was bad and you were flooded out, this is going to be as worse or worse in the coming days in those areas. We don't know exactly where, but again, somewhere, Savannah, Charleston, Myrtle Beach, those areas, the eastern part of Georgia and the Carolinas, especially southeast and eastern North Carolina. But the bullseye, Britta, seems to be in those areas around Savannah and Charleston on the models. That's where they're putting those 20-plus inch rainfall totals.
The products too, Mike, that we get from the WPC, those issuance of high risks, we didn't see them 3 days out until 2017. That was Harvey. And then to your point, it was also Florence in 2018. We saw that. Barry, Sally, Ian, and Hillary last year. A day 3 high risk outlook. We have that now with Debby. It is a concerning trend with that steering pattern, to your words, falling apart, Debby slowing down, and also not a good sign for relationships, not a good sign for tropical cyclones. Fox Weather storm specialist Mike Seidel there in the elements this morning. Appreciate it. We've been diving into this newest advisory.